Although I put a link to a former prosecutor mentioning threats on President Trump, and I put a link to Judge Napolitano's videos and his international, world and American intelligence sources at countries A through Z. There are collusions with organized crime, acts, and methods that each country has self-guided roles with, and they leave that out when they quote intelligence and they speak about their, their. And they'll go, hey, now what's your side? Or when they speak about serious, I just in other words, or the opposite, the nature whatever is done or said, just to hide what actually was, is recorded at all locations /s. Everywhere the human species body has a body standing. We have been so through and as syntactically appreciated systems, tactically ulterior from how we are the human species body, a different body than other species bodies, made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies. All group differences are generated by that which is generating totally different species bodies the same way at the same time. So we could discern the importance of discerning how there is one distinct identity of value/value progression, as the ancients did. There's an obligation to make a scientific value. They could not agree about what to call the name of that scientific value, but they knew they had to agree about it. I mean, they knew they had to just, call it something. Because while they were, studying everything, they learned that nature itself is showing us how it is functional, how its identity is hyper invisible but still discernible distinctly from how it is invisible but still discernible. Ancient languages in the English language more probably and demonstrably was revealed to teach this before the sciences became criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought, but from off them, forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded, not even realizing at first the locations, areas, and states as the only ones that could operate the phenomenon of the names of countries in this hypervolume science, generating in our species body of individual bodies and all group differences. See, but now we have all group differences appreciated through and as other syntactically appreciated systems. And that would be all right if you guys would allow free speech, because it would have brought up for us, example, too, the significance of why and of how our founders, plural, communicated for us to only know, and why and how they could only let us understand and know the specific name of our founder is James Madison. He's the only founder we know the name of. That is a critical principle and part. And why and how George Washington didn't have free speech right through his lifetime with everyone, distinctly from everyone else, but also non-distinctly. That is also principle. See, the experts on the names of the people of the sciences have been relying upon each other individually, grouped and together. And honestly, only as dishonestly the way the breaching method shows them had to have, you have to pretend and say, well, that's why they did. No, everyone has an excuse. But nature has been communicating other. Like black people's whites of eyes is inseparable from American history and from how the other countries were entrenched with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, international companies, ones like that too. On top of that, in other words, and all roles with that had been sustained. Again, Native Americans against Native Americans, all reactions to help themselves, because the breaching method is measuring, maintaining uses, defenses of uses of names A through Z, through and as systems, tactical ulterior, from how it communicates with differences A through Z, using the human species body of individual bodies, system generated by and as its own, which is hyper invisible but still discernible. The parts of speech of English grammar are about the invisible but still discernible. Like, for example, a subject. Everything comes with the slash, hyper invisible, but still discernible. The parts of speech are about the simultaneous slash hyper simultaneous. The slash hyper simultaneous is that hyper invisible but still discernible distinct identity, generating how and why we are distinct from other species bodies, while we are simultaneously another way slash s non-distinct from the other species bodies, and we are simultaneous with the other species bodies per this further distinct identity of hyper-simultaneous nature that is not us nor it is them, but is all things anyway. And then it is a further way itself. It is one way distinct as itself that way. In other words, just like the parts of your body are distinctly yourself. And this is why and how you are its body. But with the Constitution has been abridged, and there have been collusions with this. And the breaching method shows them they need to hide how names on all sides of criminal and civil cases. And the courts themselves, the police forms, the interbranch, the family members, all natures of conjunctions to everyone like that. And the difference of their guilt or the people next to them. There's styles of criminal insidious natures of logic, needs, and natures only allowed to be heard. Otherwise, they steal our identities as styles. In other words, and this has been against us all, forced not to say anything about it. On a mass scale, everything that came before superior courts, probate courts are right in elderly homes, hospitals. There are proofs that they're at veterans' homes too. All kinds of fake transcripts and natures of collusions with predicate acts with facts methods that originally still most affected, facilitated, and controlled overt criminal enterprises and private ones, including at the same time collusions with the interbranch, what witch trials are about, why there's a witch trials place next to Webb House in Weathersfield, Connecticut, where George Washington had to come with James Madison's plan and to counter-extort right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War. So why and how they had to leave slavery entrenched southern colonies is not clear, not because people didn't do their homework. And when people didn't do their homework, mainly it's because, first of all, I don't even need to do that much homework. The way they're just restricting who's going to do what, and they're just putting fake things in databases since we were born. And then further with there are campuses, and it uses the exceptions because it's using difference /s, different ages of fact-checking nature. It measures and maintains. You guys have self-value collusions with foreign and domestic medical families, including right on Facebook, and with the Whiting forensics, and with the Britain Superior Court, Harper Courts, Connecticut's District Court. They have remote uses of the sense and sensibilities of Judge Napolitano in a Fox News that hid this from him to use him for predicate acts. If you guys want to do what's right, WFSB did worse. They attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with their sources and with the interbranch, including the interbranch. They have been stacking predicate acts with facts with everything that comes before them as collusion /s with differences, and then needing to pretend other. So uses of their own differences, other people's differences. Our founders communicated with, if you pay attention, the breaching method was entrenched, northern colonies, southern colonies, even once he was then a president too, /chief, James Madison. He still didn't have free speech. You guys want to have natures of the debate regarding this stuff, self-valuing sequence shifts too, to defend your logic and your credibility. We could just look where all individual voices have been prevented credible speech. Then they blame things on politics. In other words, we have black pupils, white survivors that is inseparable from any subject with American history. First of all, because it has been left out and replaced. They replaced what our founders communicated, left declassified for themselves and for us to understand about how a human fact treatment nature breaching method forced roles with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, criminally foreign influence / hyper criminally foreign influence branches of government, intelligence tied to them never stops being used remotely. Criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions are shown needs, means, and nature could be used to keep debate about that, about general things, and or self-biased rules with the sequence shifts and the collusions with predicate acts with facts. They have little kids. You start communicating others. So the breaching method showed them how to teach America's teachers. It has them with criminally foreign influence, fact, human nature, quality aspects in nature, knowing that they would right where no one wants and no one wanted collusion / S with intelligence agencies, foreign and domestic, from off all campuses, all ages and natures of campuses. They have been shared here and there, where they agreed to agree and where they agreed to disagree. The difference of that too being having been used by a hyper archetypal criminal enterprise method, so to speak. I am not a lawyer. We have black people's rights of eyes. Who denies that this is about the difference? It uses the difference between it being a criminal insidiousness nature delivery system method or predicate acts with facts delivery system method. That involved with playing games, pretending not to realize the hyper evidential. How we have black people's rights of eyes. We have means to discern how the courts have been stacking fake things in databases and building upon that. And dishonestly pretending to be, when they say, well, why was this person arrested so many times? Increasingly with the arrests, including when there are collusions with all natures of crime scenes, all natures of investigators. We have means to discern how they are being and have been used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. And how it's relative to how they are victims / hyper victims. But but they'll jump into our conversation dishonestly before we could say that. Oh, well, I thought you were trying to say that against police. So that's evidence itself. These are people that can't get onto the paper. They can't get on video legitimately, and or not, nor without self-evaluating. Collusions with hierarchy and lower, overt criminal enterprise, private ones, at the same time with the interbranch intelligence, their family members. They speak for adult and kids and differences as styles and collusion / S with those principles replaced as arrays where they value their differences. Well, I don't even like those. In other words, those criminal enterprises and the people with the border exploiting the border. But they have collusion / S with all kinds of drugs and medicines, crimes and delusions, and predicate acts with facts methods. That most so. Originally, still demonstrably, nature can be itself. I'm not even lawyer. Nature itself shows that they had witch trials placed next to a Webb House. Webb House is now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. Then and now, still they have other communicated for James Madison that he had left to have communicated for himself. It has the names of the people of sciences using their knowledge of good and evil to use a phrase after the part of the Old Testament that says, there's a part before the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life is a part that says, only defend right here, where the names of the people of the sciences will come together in the part that comes before it. But no one ever even heard about that part. Because this is a breaching method against any individual voice. Because of how only an individual can defend the order of the finite. Because of how nature never stops demonstrating how it is what is individual, distinctly from how it is what is grouped, distinctly from how it is what is simultaneous. And for example, with subjects, we can only appreciate subjects individually and or finite, grouped, and simultaneous to an extent. And we can discern that about ourselves and about that quality aspect and nature of ourselves. We can discern also hyper simultaneously to an extent. Its identity, that identity of value progression that is too great and is too finite for us to understand completely. And was active relativity to ourselves too. But it shows us it is exception slash S and as exception nature. As exception slash S, we could just anyone can, in other words, we all know that the rest of the species bodies have individual bodies. The rest of humanity could discern the body of the future, the body of seasons that are not even here yet, even if they never make it here again. How its body, those seasons are only increasing value here now. See, we have appreciated the value of nature systems, the season, through industries, what they want to debate on the other end of war. As peace, criminal and seditious natures of peace, had one honest nature been allowed to educate one school, one town properly, in other words, the whole world would change. In one location area of the state, anywhere where the species body has a body standing, it would change everything. You guys can't afford to have mandated law followed. So WFSB, Connecticut Channel 3 News, attached me to fake conversations with themselves and others. They have a bunch of people with Harper courts and their family members in intimate ties. New Britain Superior Court, their family members in intimate ties. They colluded at West Hartford locations and at the next to campuses and next to fire departments, which are also campuses, but they're also trained on campuses. A bunch of people tied to a Del Fair family have roles with probate court judges and people, other probate court judges with their intimate ties with them. And they have roles on, I never saw them there. They have roles on 2-Rail Highway, increasingly roles with sexual and medical offenders of kids, and people putting fake identity theft, fraud, slanders with judges and prosecutors putting fake things in databases. Their roles with fire departments with other countries too, all along roads and routes, all along Route 175 from the founding locations in Old Weathersfield, and all along Route 3. Like, for example, in conjunction into that, like the state judicial branch offices, they have been collusion /S with a whole bunch of people on off 2-Rail Highway and Hangdog Lane in conjunction into that, like with the Mike Roberts and people involved with state police and forensics and intercities police departments involved with the same house /S, one's tied to them. Where they had simultaneously collusion /S with child abusers, leaders of kids, people involved with that. Well, at first forced, people involved with that, with all the BS, with all the badios, rather, associated with that. Badios has been donated to the languages A through Z, as has been, Babajaros or Babajarosis. And this is regarding this hypervolume science, so to speak, that has been replaced. Proper appreciation of our sciences, including English, because they need to keep obfuscated how nature has been showing its shares. It shows us the identities appear not to share an identity, only even though they do anyway, because it's constantly teachings about how its identity is hyper additional nature. It is answering our question increasingly where everything came from. This identity of value /value progression that we have to name, but it is functional how it is hyper invisible, distinct, but still discernible distinctly from how it is invisible but still discernible. And anything we speak is about the invisible but still discernible, not the hyper invisible but still discernible. If we leave out finite details, let alone finite, grouped, and active relativity, like as a criminal insidiousness, and progressive, like criminal insidiousness look forward to, even by the peace natures, speaking at the other ends of wars. So that's why we're supposed to focus honestly on the threats with nuclear technology. And technology, we're not supposed to, technology is something, is good or is it bad? Let's debate about it. In other words, these are all systems using positive and negative tactical terror from how nature does. And as collusion screening the breaching method for a function, it knew that the breaching method knew that at countries A through Z, at locations, areas, and states, A through Z, everywhere the human species body has a body standing, nature would be demonstrating negative value, nature progressions, acts, and nature is the ground, its identity, relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that is and has been a system tactical terror from the ones that we've been allowed to, we've been forced to entertain syntactically and with nature. See, when you guys want to debate things, you can't do it honestly. So you have to value fake things in databases. Oh, look, see? In other words, they've been stacking fake things in databases at each of the campuses we went to. They're switching and forging names through administrations. A whole bunch of people with the federal agencies, including former director of the F.B.I., former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act. He has many from Wethersfield, Connecticut, on up the state corrections offices and judicial branch offices, and with names next to them, involved with military through world wars, involved with World Trade Center predicate acts with them, also with names next to the news locations and other natures and methods of organized crimes through their more organized crime acts and methods. Increasingly, these are people at that time, when people are going to be out of quarantine, they say things, and they also do that on mass, usually when people don't even know them. They just hear a voice come from some, in other words, when someone walks by, they make statements like as confessions. This breaching method used confessions before religious messengers were born. And they knew that the people that would have to preserve their books would stay collusion /S as A through Z have stayed as differences. But so they knew that they would appreciate how the church uses confessions, non-distinctly from the breaching method. But it also used it non-distinctly. And that was this for us to discern. A through Z being and having been used remotely, not by a devil, by a hyper archetypal criminal enterprise, by quality aspects in nature inside the nature of debate/debates. All plural things are generated by it. We could use systems other, change it, make it, ignore it, but it will only demonstrate with negative value, nature progressions, acts, and nature. And it already made all these rules, needs, nature, styles. Keeping those things blamed on other things, others ourselves, and as identities of integrity reliant upon that being and having been. In other words, and self-valuing things like war is used to force perspective. Not one proper, legitimate voice has spoken for speculation. And with their excuses, see, to defend America, we have to defend our difference, understanding James Madison's difference, how he was prevented free speech distinctly from every other individual, but also non-distinctly. And this brings up the breaching method, clearer than day. Many pray. Please judge Napolitano and Fox News, Fox Connecticut News too. A bunch of people at and next to the networks, like next to WFSB, next to Fox Connecticut News, next to WTNH, which is also the FBI, They have collusions with people on two route highway and Hangdog where it runs into Hangdog Lane, and conjunctions to that and to that, like the state judicial branch offices with Route 3 in the Berlin Turnpike before the heart of Hartford. And there's a Casper family. I never had anything to do with the Chet Casper. He's been involved with people involved with identity theft, fraud, sequence shifts, slanders. He starts a fight with me, ends up on the ground, and then the guy jumps in and breaks it up. I never got the chance to defend myself. And he did that at a place, in other words, on the Berlin Turnpike, increasingly brought up by people involved with Heather Hansen and other people that didn't even go to my school. Increasingly, people tied to mayors from Wethersfield and former director of the F.B.I. Robert Luskin, his co-defendants and their family members, and people that have intelligence families involved with the Connecticut state capitol and next to it, and ad placements, including with the networks. These are sense and sensibilities. The breaching method shows them how they have to do that, though. There's a hyper foreign involved. WFSB has many involved with the name as like more than one sexual relations roles with Claudia Scalora. Per them, I never had a conversation with Claudia Scalora verbally. And her cousins were increasingly involved with years apart home break-ins in my area, in wire crimes of the Wethersfield police, and other natures and methods of organized crimes and drugs and medicines crimes with foreign and domestic medical families. And they have cousins of theirs involved with that, with other last names. And with the same house on my street, planting evidence of people from other areas, fishing. They have judges and prosecutors. See, these are people that help the Democrats and the Republicans, but they can't defend how their uses of difference for either side without self-valuing roles the way the breaching method shows them to speak for difference/differences. So they're not following mandated law. Intercities, they have predicate acts methods every year since the World Trade Center attack. From what I caught them doing at West Hartford and the Britain locations with people from my street in Wethersfield with their educators, increasingly tied to planting evidence on corners of streets as federal crimes with syntax, where they consciously have evidences rackets and dishonestly pretending with incapable of hearing a case properly, of describing instance properly, including the fire departments. And this is where there are victims/hyper victims. They also recorded dishonestly, pretend it's personal to change and fake what is actually recorded. So Judge Napolitano, a whole bunch of people, judges retired and standing with the Britain Superior Court and Hartford courts and Connecticut District Court, also with prosecutors and their family members, and little kids too. They involved with of a Leahy family, as one of a Leahy family has generations of their family, including little kids, involved with principal child abusers and leaders of kids, involved with interreligious nutbags, trying to make people speak bad things about themselves or their groups because they're using their groups as weapons too. In other words, it's why they're still saying speak in black and white. We don't have the breach, what our founders communicated about the breaching methods, reassignment of black people's white survivors communications. Therefore, natures. In other words, when nature is not only criminal insidiousness, trying to pretend, in other words, nature itself shows us about criminal foreign influences. I'm not a lawyer. We have means to discern what's actually recorded. The lawyers had collusion/S with all sides of cases at countries A through Z since semi-ancient times. Please, Judge Napolitano, do what's right. New Britain Superior Court won't get on paper. They have former director of the F.B.I., Robert Luskin. Now they have James Comey. There are proofs that the Brennan and other ones involved with New Britain Superior Court and Hartford courts, they have roles with their intimate ties too, with former director of the F.B.I., Robert Luskin, and his co-defendants before the World Trade Center attack. They affected confessions to me, requests for help. I recorded how they have all scams tied to that because I did what's right. And they changing and faking hid what I actually recorded, attached me to fake conversations at the same time with people so that others could pretend. They didn't really know there's a bigger array. They're also consciously attached in the fake conversations they attached me to. They said that I said that people were following me, and they said that these are people investigation investigators who use remotely criminally foreign tactically illusions, rot, raising still. Criminally foreign readings of statutes and precedents, tactically delusions, raw, all kinds of organized crimes, roles that were facilitated by the rules of predicate acts but facts methods. With the method /S, the breaching method that had slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies. Even to understand that, you have to appreciate how it was exploiting every human difference in name, individual grouped and together, measured and maintained roles within a system of tactical terror from how nature uses those differences. We're going to have to appreciate the languages. The sciences, syntax, to correction /S. And I don't know if the Connecticut Corrections Office and Judicial Branch offices are increasingly collusion /S with people with the FBI involved with names like former mayors from Wethersfield and Joshua Stryker involved with putting predicate acts with facts of people from my area tied to them at campuses I went, intercities. And now they're playing games, searching for means to cover things up. Get the police on paper, one name and sequence. What are they doing? Making confessions with the Sullivan and with the name Colo, to who they have a bunch of people named Sullivan involved also with the Daryl Sullivan. I don't know. Only he's on Park Street, involved with the FBI director in a whole bunch of different countries, involved with sexual medical offenders of kids and more leaders of kids tied to them in a Lance Cuddy. And planting evidences and all kinds of scams with databases, including medical databases. You guys are incapable of speaking for departments and programs and things like that. Guys, get them on paper, one name and sequence, black pupils. Here,